Hey everybody, thank you for joining us on the FareCompare weekly video podcast. My name is Rick Cini. I'm the co-founder and CEO of FareCompare.com. This is episode number 49, and we're going to be chatting a little bit about lost bags and what you do after you found out your bags got lost. And by the way, there's some new stuff from the past few months that also helps out with that, but we'll also talk about some of my particular issues with that over the years and why I don't actually check a bag unless I have to anymore. We'll also talk about a new report we put out this morning on the Southwest Effect Part 2. Remember in Part 1, we had some cheaper prices to some Central American, Mexico beaches, also some Caribbean cities. But did those people in those particular destinations who want to come to the U.S. get a break? And we'll find out a bit shortly. We'll also talk about our event of the week as we head down to the beach between the coast of Florida and Alabama to a shrimp festival. So we'll check that out. And we'll also take a customer question. So let me start with my partner in crime here from California, who's the editor at our site here at FareCompare, Ann McDermott. Hey, Ann, how are you today?
I'm good, Rick. And I think the customer question, will resonate with a lot of people. It's one you're going to hit out of the park, but you always do. But this one, I think people will really like this. It may save you money. It may, well, we'll see.
It may commiserate, I think.
Yeah, I think you're going to commiserate.
So, well, a couple things. On the airline lost my bag front, well, we've chatted lots of times about bags and my aversion to checking a bag. Just got back this summer from Italy from an almost 2-week trip. I think it was 13 days without checked bags with my teenager and wife. We didn't seem to have any problem. Haven't had any problem in over a decade since we quit actually checking anything. Now there are times when I have to check. So the last time I checked my golf clubs to Scotland, somebody threw them out and dragged them through the Atlantic before they got back to Dallas. So this is why I'm not a big fan of doing that. But I think a couple things. First, you have to sort of plan your before you're flying activities.
Yeah. It is very helpful to, well, first of all, as you point out, if you can get away with a carry-on is not going to get mishandled by the airline. It's going to be with you. It's not going to get lost. And, you talked about just coming back from Italy a couple of years ago. My family of 3 went to Italy, and 2 of the 3, our checked bags, went missing upon arrival for 3 days.
But only 1 in 5 billion is ever mishandled, Ann. How could that possibly happen to both of us?
I should have bought a lottery ticket that day. I know, but so obviously, as Rick says, and I have done ever since then, use a carry-on. But if you are taking a checked bag, okay, pack carefully. Don't pack anything that you can't, that is valuable, that is irreplaceable, or that you're going to need, like medication or, cords, charger cords.
Yeah, electronics. I always carry an extra pair of glasses because I always have a screw that pops out or something in the middle of a trip. I've learned over time. But yeah, you don't want anything of that in your bag. And I always like to drop a business card into my bag and also take a picture of the actual contents of the bag just in case. So, and I even do it with a carry-on just in case. Who knows? You leave it at the airport lounge or something like that accidentally.
And I think taking the picture is great because when I lost my bag, they said, "Okay, what make is it?" And of course, I'm staring at the guy blankly, and I said, "Well, it's black." It was not a pretty sight. So your advice of taking a picture is perfect.
Yeah, and I'll have to admit, I mean, there's places like, for example, Intra-Europe where they will not let you actually carry on a bag of a certain size, and the ones that you want on a 2-week trip in Europe, so you're going to end up in some cases having to check that bag. I've had to do that on Air France before, for example. So it's going to happen, and it's always a good idea to be prepared ahead of time. I think the other thing, too, you have to be really careful about is, okay, your bag is missing. You've arrived. You've watched the carousel for, 6 weeks or so as it spins around. If you happen to have the spinning around carousels like we do at DFW, then what? It's important that you don't leave the airport and then try to make a claim. You need to speak to somebody at the airport. Now, it's not always easy to find those people, but you do have to find those people there at the airport.
Yeah, and if you can't find somebody, go to the reservations desk out front, but usually there's somebody in baggage claim, and these offices are usually by the carousels. But if worse comes to worse, there's nobody around, call and document your call, ask who you're speaking to. But anyway,
Exactly.
just go on the record. And this is especially important in case, obviously if your bag is missing, you want to make a report so you can get it back. But if your bag is damaged, don't leave the airport without reporting that too, because if you come back the next day and say, hey, I just noticed this is broken, they'll say, well, that could have happened on the way home from the airport. So, take care of this kind of stuff before you do.
I've seen people arrive at 2 a.m. where there's nobody there and there's not much you can do. So just contact the airline, document the call, get the person's information on the other end of the phone. But you do need to contact somebody so you have it on your timeline. So as far as that's concerned, your documentation is what's going to. The other thing too, at that point too, as you look at what's going on sort of after the fact, there's new rules out there about, for example, checked bags and refunds of the checked bag fee. The Department of Transportation has new rules. That's 12 hours, I believe, domestic, 18 hours international. Potentially on your credit card, lost bag coverage so they can actually do something for you fairly quickly. The airlines also can do that as well, so it depends on what kind of credit card you carry. So be sure and brush up on that if you're going to do that as well. And then, of course, you have to keep track of all your payments and necessities if you're going to do it with the airline, because in theory you'll be reimbursed, but it typically doesn't happen right away.
No, it doesn't happen right away. I think that depends on the airline, but and the kind of stuff you're allowed to buy, certainly toiletries and I don't know, maybe a T-shirt if you have absolutely no clothes, but do not be buying designer gowns because you will not get refunded for stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I had a friend that spent 45 minutes over a glass of wine with a group of people talking about how they went to a wedding in Europe and all of their stuff was in checked bags, including all the tuxedos and dresses and bridesmaids' dresses, and it didn't make it to the wedding. And the ensuing story was about 45 minutes. But so just be aware of those things, and again, valuables up in the cabin.
Did those wedding people, did they have to buy all new clothes?
They did have to buy all new clothes.
Did the airlines reimburse?
I don't know the end of that story, so I only caught it after it occurred. So my guess is probably not as much as they paid to switch everything out. So, the funny thing about airlines, within 3 nanoseconds after you pay, it's off your credit card, and anytime you get a refund, 2 or 3 credit card billing cycles.
Well, on that pleasant note, let's turn to Southwest Effect 2.
Yeah, so we did a study a little while back, about I guess 4 or 5 months ago. We really wanted to see what would happen with Southwest building or actually opening up this new terminal down in Houston's International Terminal, and they took over some which were in the Caribbean and a couple of Mexican beach destinations. I think Central America, Belize was in there as well. We want to see if prices dropped, right? He just added, and they were adding new aircraft and the new terminal. And what we found in our first study was, yes, the prices did drop. Now, there were some things that going on. There was some hurricane season. More recently, there was the Zika virus scare. So certainly that could be a big part of it. But certainly the prices to the Caribbean, which are pretty hefty, by the way, and you're pretty lucky outside of Puerto Rico. Which typically is a bit cheaper. Historically, was American hub, and more recently with JetBlue flying there. You're talking about tickets, the best of tickets in the $450 range, and the sort of holiday tickets up in the $800 to $1,100 range to those locations. So what we wanted to do is see if the people that actually were in those particular countries, in those cities, flying back to the U.S., coming and hanging out here and eating in our restaurants and staying at our hotels and spending their money, see if they actually got a price drop or not. And what we found was they actually didn't get much of a price drop. Only people originating in the U.S. apparently get a price drop. And with that information, the question is why?
It's a good question. It seems so unfair,
Yeah, no, it's sort of part of it potentially is currency conversion. Part of it is the amount of traffic that comes through might not be enough for that originating traffic. We're still trying to dig into some of the factors. So we do know as part of the study that they don't get much of a break. And there's some surmising about why that is. And the question is, will that continue, or will they finally get a break on some of those prices?
So this could change. The situation could be fluid?
I think it's potentially fluid. I think part of it has to do with the economies of both the U.S. and in places like Caribbean nations, Central America, Mexico, for example. So some of those factors are involved, but we did find that was interesting because we did expect actually the prices to come down for originating people, and they did not. So we're going to dig a little bit deeper as we get some of the answers into the study. But if you happen to be in one of those countries watching the podcast, we'll keep you informed of how that is, and hopefully what you'll see is that Southwest effect actually kick in as they add capacity. So they haven't added a tremendous amount of capacity yet, but we look for them to add some capacity down there. That might drop down the prices.
Well, let's talk about whether the refund effect will help Greg from New Orleans. He's a customer with a question, and he says, I purchased tickets through Delta for travel to New Orleans. This is from Minneapolis, MSP. That's Minneapolis, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay. He made the reservation on Delta, Minneapolis to New Orleans on September 21st. But he says, I realized I booked the wrong week. I should have booked for September 14th. And in the meantime, the tickets have increased $160 plus, and I am being charged a $200 rebooking fee. We've heard that before. He says, do you have advice for me?
Wow. Okay. So a couple things. And by the way, I've missed the day before.
Yeah.
Usually not a week off, but usually a day off. Periodically, I'll do that. So unfortunately, the fact that this question's coming up after 24 hours, likely, you don't have the lemon rule out there, which is the 24-hour guarantee for refunds if you want to cancel your ticket. That was
a change your mind fees, or change your mind grace period, I think some people call it.
Yeah, in Texas we call that the lemon law. I bought it, but I want to give it back. So that was a rule that was, I think that came in 2.5-3 years ago, where the Department of Transportation added that rule. Now, with that rule, we need to be careful, because you can also, by the letter of that particular ruling, you can also allow consumers to hold your ticket. So like airlines like American Airlines, it's a hold feature as opposed to buy it and then getting a refund at 24 hours. So just be careful about that. If you buy an American ticket and then try to go cancel it within 24, they're going to say you should have held it, and you'll fall into this same $200 rebooking fee. As well as who was this, Greg? As Greg actually found out, you get to pay whatever the current ongoing price is for that ticket as well. So to me, this is the most onerous fee that's out there. That combined with a bag fee is, I think, last year somewhere close to $5.5 billion for both those combined. So Greg is not alone. And really, there's, from an advice perspective, well, I mean, this is sort of Monday morning quarterbacking here, but it's really important whenever you purchase tickets and you're about to virtually swipe that credit card on the website that you reconfirm your dates. Make sure you pick the right ones. Make sure it's the right cities. I still get a giggle for the guy that thought he was going to Sydney, Australia, and ended up in Sydney, Montana from Germany. And didn't realize that till he got off the little small aircraft. So airport codes are important. So that's some advice. for example, another thing that happens a lot is people don't realize they're connecting in New York, but they're landing in LaGuardia and then leaving out of JFK.
Right.
Accidentally. So you got to be careful about your connecting airports and cities. Sort of the after the fact issue, you're really sort of at the mercy of the court. I know Southwest Airlines, for example, doesn't have a change fee, so that would, if this ticket had been on Southwest, the $200 rebooking fee wouldn't have been in play. The new price point, I've seen people calling and other folks, and they do have the ability to waive some of these things from time to time. You have to get the right person on the phone, and you have to do it sort of right after you've booked it, historically within the next 36 hours or so. Of course, you have the 24-hour rule. So there's not a huge amount you can do. Now, the question is Delta now cheap for the trip you really wanted, right? And right. So the question is, should you rebook it on another airline that's cheaper? So you should be shopping. Essentially, let's assume for the sake of argument that Greg bought his ticket for $250. He's going to get minus $200. That leaves him $50, and then plus the one, whatever he said, $60 or $70. That's the additional price. So he's going to pay an additional, essentially an additional $170 or so. And so they're going to subtract that from his original ticket price and then add on this amount. So let's say it was $250. That new ticket's $410. So now he's looking at paying over $350 plus his original 200 and some odd 50 or so. So that makes it a very painful ticket to buy, and that $350 may be cheaper on another airline.
Okay, so he's got, according to you, two options. One is to just walk away from this expensive ticket if you can find a decent price otherwise, and do the math to see if it would make sense.
You just have to do the math and decide. It's possible to try to get a human on the phone. You can plead your case. Some of them can waive that penalty sometimes, but
right.
I've anecdotally heard of that happening, but it's sort of a pretty long shot there, and you can't do it online for sure. You'd have to get a human involved. So.
And that's the second option, is throw yourself on the mercy of the people who answer the telephone at Delta.
Yeah, and I've also seen people send notes to customer service saying they did this incorrectly, and sometimes they'll get a $50 voucher or something like that. You can try those things. Don't guarantee that they'll work, and certainly it's not the airline's obligation to do anything in those particular situations. But definitely, you're looking at $300 and some odd in that case, assuming the ticket price. There might be a cheaper ticket on another airline at that point.
Okay. Great.
Really, I wish I could help Greg. It's sort of like, hey, Greg, if I could wave a magic wand, no more fee, and you get the same price. In reality, what's happened is that, and I remember, by the way, Ann, when the rebooking fee was $50, then it became $100. Then
yeah.
And then $200. By the way, on international tickets, it's $300.
Yep.
So I think what I like to say is you have to treat it like a Rolling Stone concert ticket. If you're not going on that day, you're going to lose the value. Unfortunately, you can't sell it and scalp it to somebody else because your name on that ticket has to end up being you no matter what in the future. You couldn't change it and say, well, I've still got $50 residual value. I'd like to give it to somebody else. It has to be used by you. And by the way, if you do not call before that original date that you had there, and you just say, okay, I'm just going to buy another ticket elsewhere, that $50 value or however much the value was, you actually lose that value without reclaiming it and getting an e-ticket number that you can apply to a future purchase.
Okay, so if he does decide to walk away, he's got to call and say, I'm not going to use this ticket.
Exactly, because if you go back and say, well, I didn't use this ticket, they'll go, did you call? And he'll say, well, no, I didn't, but I still have some value left, and they say, no, you won't. So just be careful. Oh no, it's the most onerous fee that's out there, because not only are you paying for the upgraded price, typically you're doing this at the last minute. In this case, Greg evidently found his mistake fairly early because we haven't even hit mid-September yet.
Yeah.
But usually people find this out as they're heading to the airport or the day before, and then go, now you're looking at not $160, you're looking at $500 or $600 extra, and at that point, then it's about redoing your ticket, maybe using your award miles, or again finding another airline and doing some of the net last-minute tips that are out there.
If anybody else has a question for Rick, and hopefully one that's not quite this one.
This one's painful, and I've actually been there a couple times. It's been a while because all it takes is one of these to sting you, and guess what?
Yeah.
You definitely look over airports, and you definitely look over the dates, and you make sure the spouse is cool with the date, and and to be honest, it can be complicated. It's like, do I do the hotel first? Do I do the air? Which
Yes.
of the days?
Yes.
Did the airplane arrive on the next day, and how does that work? So it can be complicated. So just be sure and triple check those things before you have that virtual credit card.
And you can send Rick a question at customer.service@faircompare.com, and he will do his darndest to help you out.
There's one trick I also do, and just in case, I also forward it over to my wife and say, hey, take a look, make sure this is correct. That way, if it is screwed up, I can lay the blame elsewhere.
Well,
so
that's handy. Yeah.
having two sets of eyes is always good as well.
Okay, the event of the week, Eventurous. I love this one, and it is?
Two of my favorite things, shrimp and beaches. So we've got the annual National Shrimp Festival. If you're a shrimp, you probably do not want to attend that, but if you're a human, you do. It's out there, right there on the borderline between Florida and Alabama, Gulf Shores beach, and the closest airport is hop, skip, and a jump would be Pensacola. I know that several airlines flying there. Southwest actually recently was flying into some of those to catch some of those people that are going up and down sort of that portion of the beach. But I was reading through the different things because I'm just a huge shrimp fan. I've been trying to lose a little weight. Shrimp don't have a lot of calories, so
Yeah.
I'm in for the shrimp.
And this is in October, I believe. Yeah, October 13th to the 16th.
Yeah, so it's over a weekend, kid-friendly event. So if you want to take your kids down there, beautiful beaches, by the way, in that particular section. And apparently several hundred vendors, I know Forrest Gump also likes shrimp in a variety of ways. I'm sure you can find his variety there. So check out the Shrimp Festival in Gulf Shore, Alabama. And be sure, it's that October date. It's right in the deal zone. So you should be able to find pretty good deals depending on what city you're flying from.
And I know where you can find them. Come to FareCompare.com.
Absolutely, yeah, and set up alerts for those particular dates. You can go on and check out the Eventurous app. You can download it on both your iPhone and your Android phone off the Play and App Stores in those respective devices. And you can also find it online on our website as well by just doing FareCompare.com Eventurist with TURIST at the end /Eventurous.
Thanks, Rick.